I had to get up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning to take a loved one into our care. This case was a hospice call. You got to wake up and you go there. You have to be there for the family. And I especially needed to be there because I just met them a few days earlier as they pre-planned the funeral.
Welcome to Seriously Catherine, a podcast about taking your business seriously, but not yourself.
Hello and welcome to Buried in Conversation. My name is Brittany Demarco-Furman, and I'm a licensed funeral director. I'm also a mom, a wife, an author, a businesswoman. I'm also a great friend who will need to be pulled off the dance floor. I'm also a Rotarian in the community. What I really consider myself is a Gemini. You never know what I'm going to be doing next, and that's what I love about life. So if you tell me to jump, I say how high, because life is a journey, and I know more than anyone, life is short. So I'm going to make my time matter. As a fourth-generation funeral director at my family firm, I have been raised in this mysterious business. When people meet me, they are shocked to learn that I'm a funeral director. It's so interesting because I've been raised in it and I've been involved in the community. I know those gentle moments when people first meet us are so important, and it really made me into the person I am today. So I am proud to have you here with me and go through this journey of uncovering the mystery of the funeral industry and also just going 6 feet deep in conversation. So before I spill the tea and uncover the mystery of who I am and the mystery of death, dying, and then what comes next, I like to have a little tease out there and talk to you about the question that I get asked the most. Well, Brittany, how do you do what you do? So later in today's episode, I will tell you how I do it and how I get my strength. But first, let's have a hot take brought to you by Paint and Sip. I want to talk about kids' birthday parties, ages 1 to 5. Okay, so I understand you want to have that first birthday party. It is a milestone for you as parents. And oh my gosh, just the cake smashing. You know, you got to get those photos. You got to have a group of people to be there to celebrate and see your little smush. But afterwards, birthdays 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5. What are we doing? What are we doing to ourselves, moms? I am a mother who had to go through a Chuck E. Cheese experience for my daughter's 3rd birthday. And let me tell you, what a stressful event. They have you there 30 minutes prior, but you're not allowed to set up until 10 minutes prior. You have everything ready. And they're like, well, no, not yet. Your guests are starting to arrive. It is an assembly line of birthday parties. There was my daughter, Madison. There was Kevin, John, Becky. We're all there together. It was insane. And let me tell you, if you're looking to plan a birthday party, just know this is what you're going to expect. But you know what? I thought it was just Chuck E. Cheese. I went to a trampoline park, and let me tell you, I landed on a kid accidentally as I was chasing mine. So the question is, moms, what are we doing to ourselves? We're spending all this money. Our kids don't even know who's there. They're getting stale pizza. I need answers. What are we doing? Any people are finding some zen in birthday parties between these ages? Because these Chuck E. Cheese trampoline parks are driving me nuts. And I personally can't wait for the days of nail salons and when they want to have their little sleepovers. But then again, I have a 3-year-old. I might be having to eat my words at some point. But let me know what you think. It's my hot take. These birthday parties, 1 to 5 years old, we're kind of doing it a little bit too much. And I think we need to find some more zen. So how does one become a funeral director? Funeral directors are rare breeds. Honestly, there's more microbreweries in this area than there are funeral homes. 100%. I don't really even know that many funeral directors. And those that I do, you know, they always tell me, what are we going to do with the next generation? Who's going to take over? With the baby boomers, unfortunately, passing away, that's the next generation that we are taking care of as funeral directors. There's going to be more deaths than funeral directors. So there's definitely a shortage. So I hope this episode also maybe enlightens you to what it takes to be a funeral director and what we have to do to become one. But the story of me, I am a 4th-generation funeral director. And as somebody who's grown up in this business, I was asked over and over again, are you taking over your family business? From my guidance counselors to my business teachers in high school to my parents begging me to go, I was like, absolutely not. I didn't know enough about life to know about death, and I could not see myself at 19, 20 years old being in the arrangement room, talking to a grieving family, and them trusting me with this most precious event and something they will never forget. So it was overwhelming for me at that age. So I was to my mom and dad, see ya, and went to school. I actually have a bachelor's degree in communications and business, and I did some work in marketing in the city and throughout Albany. I explored the world a bit with some traveling, had a few heartbreaks, kind of just got that real human experience. And in between jobs, I came home, maybe with my tail between my legs a little bit, but my dad's like, hey, in between you finding your next job, help me out at the funeral home. You still know how to, answer the calls and you still know how to do the stationery, but how about you sit in on the appointments with me and work the funerals? So I was like, okay. The first one that I worked with him was a grieving widow. He changed my life forever. It was him. I just will remember the emotions and the storytelling that he gave to me in the arrangements, and I stayed back to listen to him more because my dad had to step out, so it was just him and I one-on-one, and it just took listening and being there for him to speak of his love. Because even though somebody dies, the love doesn't. And you could just feel that in the room. And I will remember him talking about their wedding song and her love for orchids. And just by listening, I surprised him the day of the funeral playing their wedding song and having an orchid on display, a white orchid on display right by the casket, which is something he didn't choose with my father, but I just did it out of just thinking that was the right thing to do. We made a connection, and he changed my life forever because I immediately enrolled into mortuary science afterwards. So that is how I personally got into it. It wasn't because I was in the funeral business. However, if I can inspire somebody else just knowing that there's purpose in this business, that's where you can begin. Now, how do you actually become a licensed funeral director? Well, I already have my bachelor's degree, but in New York State, you only need an associate's degree, and what you need to have a degree in is mortuary science. So luckily, my credits transferred over, and I was able to kind of overskip the gen eds and go right into the nitty-grittiness of it. Anatomy 101, embalming. Yes, embalming. And at Hudson Valley, we had cadavers. So we learned how to embalm a body in a real-life experience. People who donated their body to science, they also would come to us and we would go through the medical procedures of embalming. So it was a full experience through the science portion and also the business portion. You have to learn about funeral law. You have to learn about how to run a business, itemization. You need to learn how to follow the codes for OSHA. There is a lot. So you go to school to learn these fundamentals, and then after you are near the end of your graduation, you apply to do a board exam. So just like doctors and nurses and dentists, they have national boards. Us funeral directors have that as well. And we have two. You have the science portion, which talks about the embalming, the chemicals, the chemistry, the science, and then the business and arts part of it, which when I say arts, it is an art. You're restoring organic material, whether that is through restorative crafting with wax or reshaping facial structures or the makeup. So there is a lot. So you have to pass those two national boards to become a licensed funeral director. I don't want to tell people that, it's hard, but if you are very into this business and it is actually very enjoyable to learn, you will pass with flying colors. So after you pass your national boards, you then go through a 1-year internship, also known as a residency, with a funeral home. So you will, shop around and talk to different funeral homes because let's be honest, they're all different. Our funeral home, Glenville Funeral Home, is pretty modern. At this time in our lives, we're young 30-year-olds, and we are doing state-of-the-art kind of facility work and making sure that we keep up with the times. But this industry is in a way a dinosaur. And so there are some firms that are the men in black, older generation, stuck in their own ways. Nothing wrong with that. That's how we learned, and they are the OGs. But maybe that's not somewhere you wanted to go, or maybe that is somewhere you wanted to go. So you want to find the perfect balance of who you learn from, because that is a very important part of this job. Because let me tell you, you can read a book and study your textbook and get an A+ in all your exams. When you're in the workforce, when you're on the spot, you learn way more than a book could ever teach you. So after that residency is done and you're right towards the end of that year, you have to take a New York State law exam. I know, right? We have to follow regulations and laws just like any other business. And being a part of the Department of Health, you have to pass that final exam. And then finally, in my case, the mailman comes and you wonder, is that my license? Is that the letter saying I'm passed and I'm a licensed funeral director? I will never forget it. It was the coldest day in February. I'm outside shivering, so excited for my mail guy. And he's like, what is this crazy girl doing? My mom and I are out there. The camera's ready. I have it filmed. He comes over. I'm opening it up, and I feel like I forgot how to read because I was like, where am I looking? And it says pass in giant letters. My mom's like, Brittany, you pass. I got so excited, I leaped into a snowbank. And it was just such a great feeling because I worked so hard and I knew this is what I wanted to do. So just imagine that feeling is when you are in the place you know that you're meant to be. So that is what you have to go through to get that license. But I really highly recommend, if you were interested in this business, to perhaps shadow a funeral home. You don't have to be licensed to work at a funeral home. We have attendants and associates that help us go on removals, which I'll discuss later on, and work the actual events of a funeral. And you really get that hands-on experience of being in the realm of the death industry. So with a last name Demarco, I'm Italian. Could you tell? My ancestors go back 4th generation as funeral directors. Actually, my great-grandfather and his brothers started the Demarco funeral home that was in Schenectady. And let me tell you, I have some stories about those boys. And they ended up kind of separating throughout New York and opened up multiple funeral homes. So the Demarco legacy goes back to 1921. And now I'm the last living relative that's still in the business and the first girl. So I feel like I have all their spirits around me and they're here supporting me and they guide me along the way. But I have to tell you, hearing the stories from 4 generations ago is just so inspiring. Back then, we had a funeral carriage and we still do have it in the family, which is just so magnificent. And thinking about how royal and aesthetically beautiful those funerals were back then. You know, everybody was buried in a wooden casket and everybody went to church, and how the funerals were 5 hours and 3 days long. And I still wonder, how did they get the obituaries to the papers in time? And how did they know where the cemeteries were before MapQuest? I just think about how difficult and how intensive that job was, because they didn't have the modern technology we have now. So just thinking about my great-grandpa, Michael Demarco, and his brothers, they were the jet setters for who I am today. So if I feel like I'm having a hard day, I'm sure their day was 10 times harder. After my great-grandfather's generation was my grandfather, my Papa Demarco, Michael. So for anybody in the Rotterdam, Schenectady area listening in, I'm sure you know who my grandfather was. He was quite a legend, not only because he was a wonderful funeral director, but he was also just a great person, and everybody wanted to be around him. He could make anybody laugh, which is a conundrum when you think of a funeral director, but I definitely feel like I took after him as my father did. And my favorite story is when one of the funeral directors, a female funeral director from his generation, still comes up to me time after time and tells me, you know, Brittany, I was the first female funeral director in this area. And it was an all boys club. And I felt like nobody was going to give me a chance. Nobody took me seriously. But your grandfather, Michael, he did. That is just the best story I have to remember him on top of all the other ones. But I always keep that close to my heart because this profession does kind of feel like an all boys club up until recently, where more women are getting into the industry. 10 years ago, really when I was making that shift into this business, I was kind of overwhelmed. You know, everybody at the cemetery was men, everybody on the phones at the vault company, the casket company, any other contact I had to make for removals or trade calls, they're all men. You know, when you're talking about such a sensitive situation and you're only 25 years old, you want to be on your best behavior and you don't know how to break the ice. So you kind of feel like this little girl. And as I've come out of my shell over the years, I always have that story of my grandfather in the back of my head. So it is amazing to be the first female funeral director in the Demarco legacy. We now carry on to my father's generation. So I have a lot to say about my dad. I grew up behind the Glenville Funeral Home, located in Glenville in the town center. And if you don't know Glenville, it has changed immensely. My dad built that funeral home back in 1986 when it was just farmland and people from Charlton and Burnt Hills, they were country bumpkins. But it was just so crazy just seeing it grow up and the additions and the more calls we got every year and my dad creating this identity in the community. One of my favorites, well, multiple occasions, is when I'm going out to dinner with my dad and these people come up to him, kiss him on the cheek, give him a hug. And I go, is this like a distant cousin we've never met? And he's like, no, I buried her father. I buried his mother. It's just amazing the connections that he has and what an impact he's made on others and something that I pride myself in doing every single day as I follow in his footsteps. So I have nothing but good things to say about this family business because I have role models that not only have encouraged me to be myself and be a human in this experience, but also knowing that they've given me this opportunity. Having a family business is so important in today's economy, and I'm grateful for that, but also just knowing I have this longevity and this name to carry on. So even though the family business is not all perfect, there's definitely some craziness behind the scenes. It's just astonishing just working with your family under such a high stress, high emotional industry, but still finding the love at the end of the day to know that we're doing this together and love is love and we let the fights go to the side and we know the purpose of what we're doing. Dad, thank you so much for getting me involved in this business and I'm very proud to be your daughter. So what is the day in and day out of my life? How do I plan a schedule as a funeral director? And what do I do, really? I'll be honest, we had to push back today's podcast episode because I had to get up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning to take a loved one into our care, also known as a removal or a transfer. This case was a hospice call. You got to wake up and make yourself as presentable as possible at 2 a.m. Obviously, I wasn't the full face I am here. So, people are like, are you the same girl I met a few days ago? No, but you go there. You have to be there for the family. And I especially needed to be there because I just met them a few days earlier as they pre-planned the funeral and prepared their hearts to what was next. The man was on hospice and he experienced what I say a beautiful passing. 90 years old, warm in his bed, surrounded by his children. His grandchildren were just there in town, and they haven't been around in a while since the last holidays because they don't live around. And I, in the back of my head, when we were meeting with the family, I even told them, he's going to find the peace in us all being together and you having these plans in order. He may go quicker than you think. And we had this honest conversation about preparing and the death and what that's going to mean to them. And they thought they were ready too. They're like, he's ready. So when he goes, he'll go. I go to the home. I get there and I just embrace them and they just had such a good experience. It was finally just the two siblings and they were holding his hand and he looked just so peaceful. And I wish that upon everybody. I wish that's how we all passed away. Unfortunately, that is not always the case, but we're always there to pivot and make sure we know how to handle every situation. This morning was a beautiful way that I could be there for the family. So I guess we'll start by your 24/7 business. My nights on call are Tuesdays and Thursdays. That doesn't mean I don't have trade people or staff that could come in and fill in for me if I did needed to take the night off or I couldn't make it. However, you are on call. So you have to make sure that you drop anything. My dad and I, we've left Christmas dinners to go on removals together. If it's Father's Day, I go in his place, or, you have to find the balance. You have to find a schedule. And luckily at the Glenville Funeral Home, it's myself, Michael Mason, who is the same age as me, and also Alicia DeSerbo, who is just a year younger. So we joke on her that she's the little one of us all. But we all have young children. We all have toddlers, and we're finding a balance between our schedules to who is on call and how to make sure that these families feel like they're the most important thing, which they are. Even though we have our own family, they are our family when we're there for them. Speaking of the nature of the beast, it's a 24/7 business, so you got to find that balance. So we do go on the removals, our firm. We don't trade out that to anybody else, and we go there, and in cases, there could be cremation, which then means there's no preparations of the body afterwards. But embalming, I'm sure that's somebody here listening in, they can't wait for me to talk about this. We do embalm bodies. Me personally, I never got into that. I found my trade in other elements of the business, which I'll talk later on about. We have magician funeral directors, Alicia and Michael, where the science of embalming makes all the difference. Won't go into detail in this episode, but it does involve removing all the blood out of the body, draining. I'm sorry if anybody listening in didn't expect me to say that, so sorry for the cringe, but we're all organic material. What's inside of us needs to be taken out because that's how decomp starts. And then there is the chemical embalming, that fluid that is placed inside the body, which firms, and it creates this revolution of making you look like you're sleeping and your body is in a peaceful state. It is magic, it is science, and I truly have plenty of stories of how cases that you thought weren't going to be an open casket turned into be an open casket and open for the public and taking photos of their loved ones because they can't believe how good they look. So that's our job. We are artists and scientists in a way. Is it not an embalmer? I do just want to put that out there that my other two funeral directors work hand on hand with me. And then what's next is we could be dressing the bodies and doing cosmetology. I don't want to say I'm a little thing, but I'm a petite little Italian. So imagine me going around lifting caskets. Absolutely. We're there moving caskets around. We are lifting bodies and getting them dressed, putting them in their favorite outfits, and making sure they look beautiful for heaven or beautiful for the family. So I have found such peace in doing makeup on loved ones. I find it as their final event in a way. You have to make sure that you ask the questions like, did they wear red lipstick? Like, you don't want to put red lipstick on somebody who never wore makeup. You want to know what their essence was and what they looked like. So when they come to the casket, it's not, oh my gosh, that's not them. That's like, oh my gosh, that is mom. That is my sister. Oh my gosh, you even got her eyeshadow that she wore. So we do everything we can to recreate that image of them peacefully sleeping. I always bring back a Disney reference of Sleeping Beauty or Snow White, having that reflection of coming and seeing your loved one. And I don't want to call it closure, but knowing that that is them, they have passed on, and you can now start the grieving process in a healthy way. So when it comes to caring for the bodies, that's all us. As a licensed funeral director, we do it all. Everything I discussed there, you can consider the mortician part of our job. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the funeral directing part. I really do excel in. I love being there with the family every step of the way, from meeting with them, being the first person they see at the door and greeting them into our meeting room. It is such an important spot to be in because first impressions mean everything. You want to give the energy to them because they're in such a dark spot. You want to bring the light in the darkness. So that is something I'll never get back. So I always try to be on my game when I first meet a family and they come into our rooms and we start talking about life. You think it would be morbid and sad, but I make sure we can break the ice and tell those stories. Find the funniness in some of those things that they haven't thought about in a while. Looking through photos and going down memory lane. But most importantly, making sure this person that we're honoring is celebrated, honored, and remembered. I have to find ways that they aren't thinking in their grief on how we can cultivate a funeral service. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy bringing personality and personalization to each service, anywhere from music to flowers. It's kind of like event planning in a way, the biggest event of anyone's life because you're telling a whole life story. So being there with the family, and then, of course, after meeting with the family, you then have to, all the promises you made, you have to go and execute them. You have to call the cemetery. You have to call the clergy. You have to call the florist. You got to make sure that all the authorization forms are signed. You have to do the legal aspect of our job. With our license, you create the death certificates. You have to do your section, and you got to make sure the doctor does their section. The registrar's office has it. You get a permit. There's a lot that goes into it that's logistics and also clerical that people don't know. So behind the scenes, there's down in the morgue, and there's also in the office. And then let me tell you, we are everywhere. We are scattered from the crematorium, the cemeteries, the churches, making sure our place is clean and aesthetically pleasing to the family. So I definitely get at least 10,000 steps a day as a funeral director because you're moving pedestals, you're moving flowers, you're moving caskets, making sure deadlines are done. My other favorite part about this business is writing obituaries. Earlier in my introduction, I called myself an author, which I am, which I will talk about maybe in the next episode. You'll have to stay and see what I talk about next. But writing is such a passion of mine, and you can really find the essence of somebody through learning from the family. So an outsider looking in is such an honor. And I love when I can present it to the family and be like, wow, this is mom, this is her, this is dad, this is him. It is just such a rewarding experience for me as a funeral director and a person. I am also proud to be a certified celebrant. So kind of little backstory of me, I hated public speaking. As a teenager, I would get all sweaty. I just felt like very insecure. I would mumble and fumble my words. It is crazy to see me after 8-10 years in this industry, how I've grown as a public speaker. And it's because you got to be brave to be there and look people in the eye and face death head on. But I feel like if I don't do it, who's going to? Not too many people stand up to speak reflections and eulogies. I always have a way of encouraging it and making sure people have that time to do so, but not everybody wants to do that. So I feel we have to use this sacred time to tell their story. And I really do love drafting and making these speeches and these reflection pieces that are cultivated to the person and using poetry and using even music. I've used a few Bon Jovi songs. I've used Taylor Swift before. So it's really unique. And every unique person deserves a unique service. So that's one of my big passions is being the storyteller for the dead. Well, I told you we'd be going down 6 feet in conversation today. Now you know why I named this podcast Buried in Conversation. I have so much to say, but I've been documenting everything I've been doing. And along the way, making it more fun and engaging with social media. So as a funeral director, I am also in charge of the Glenville Funeral Home Instagram page and Facebook page where I share insight in the industry, what is trending, also creative ways that you could remember and memorialize your loved one. So if you're interested in learning more about these innovative things that is death industry, I encourage you to check that out. And also as a journey as a funeral director and finding that middle place of compassion, professionalism, and just being a human, I created the Buried in Conversation Instagram page where it houses more content in this industry, but also more content on what it means to be human and to uncover the death and dying mystery we all have to face one day. So I encourage you to look at both Instagram accounts or Facebook pages. That's Glenville Funeral Home handle or Buried in Conversation. Coming from the old school generations, Italians, and being a fourth generation funeral director, learning from the OGs, I have mixed in this modern trade of what being a modern funeral director is. So in doing so, I have to look forward all the time. COVID really brought in live streaming and having your services streamed. So we're seeing more live streaming services, bringing in webcasting and making sure people who are all across the globe can be there in that sacred moment. Memorial videos, that is not just an option anymore. It is the tradition now. People want to have that to stream their videos and see the music and the memories come to life. And I do see a rise in green burials. I think that this area should have more green cemeteries because it is on the rise and it is a beautiful ceremony that's not only healing the planet, but also it's unique in a way that, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, you're brought back to Mother Earth that has created us. I also see a lot more into aftercare, how we're going to care for families after a funeral. To be honest, breaks my heart after 2 weeks when the sympathy flowers are no more sympathy cards in the mail. The voicemails are thin and you kind of become a little lonely and your grief sets in. So as funeral directors, we also have to think about mental health and how we'll help families afterwards. We live in this wonderful generation where mental health is talked about day in, day out. So as funeral directors, it's our job to take care of our families afterwards and their mental health. If you're struggling with grief after loss, I do recommend a book that I am honored to be a part of, The Grief Experience. It is made up of local authors as well as authors from across the country, but we all have a voice here because we've gone through grief and we created tools to help you along. There's also prompts on how you could learn how to not overcome your grief, but learn how to live and grow with it. So if you are experiencing difficulties, there is help. I do recommend this book. And also on the Glenville Funeral Home website, there is resources. So if you're looking for bereavement counselors or even maybe spa remedies, or we learn how to handle grief in our own way, whether that's I need a vacation to find my zen, or you need to be around people that know and understand what you're going through. There's methods to know how to go to that next step. So just know we're here to help. For this week's serious business lesson brought to you by the Palette community, I want to go back to what I earlier talked about. Brittany, how do you do what you do? So I have the answer for you. Bravery. You have to be strong for this family that you're serving. These people are in their darkest moments. It takes bravery to stand up there, to be there for a shoulder, for a story, just to be there. And I know bravery, you may not think that you have it in you, but believe me, when you hear these stories that people tell you, and when you are in the realm of death and dying, you can stand up for them. So that's what I do. I find my courage, my bravery for them, for these people grieving. So today's business lesson is, you are braver than you think, baby. This Saratoga Lifestyle segment, brought to you by Saratoga Living After Hours, is the question: to be buried with shoes or not to be buried with shoes? So I don't know about you, but I want to be buried with my metallic platform heels that I wore at the last Saratoga Living event for the Universal Preservation Hall. I'm talking about the Celebrity Bartender event, everybody. If you did not see, I was dressed like Lady Gaga. That was me. I had the pink wig on. But did you see my shoes? I am a fashionista, I like to say. So I'm definitely going to be buried with shoes, and they're going to be fabulous. However, as a funeral director, I got to tell you, it is optional. You can be buried with them, but but you don't have to be. Actually, most people choose not to have shoes on because they believe they hate shoes when they're alive and they hate them when they're dead. They want to be floating on a cloud barefoot. And I love that. But a fun fact, when people do bring us shoes, they're usually moccasins. Maybe I can get a brand deal with moccasins here. You may be wondering, how did a funeral director end up as Lady Gaga at Saratoga National for a fundraising event? Well, Saratoga Living and we are friends because I am one of their insiders. So if you don't know what an insider is, I invite you to check it out with Saratoga Living and become an insider. It is a club where you get benefits and perks, and you also get discounts to their events, and also they help promote you in a way that maybe you can have your alter ego come to life, aka Lady Gaga. If you want to learn what's going on in Saratoga, I encourage you to sign up with Saratoga Living's After Hours. You won't regret it. As I close today's show, I leave you with the greatest lesson I experience every day in my profession. And the most important message of all, death is not evil. It is a part of our nature as humans. But what is more powerful than death is and forever will be love. We all die, but love never will. So please join me this next month as I take over the Seriously Catherine podcast. I will be hosting the next few episodes, so come and join me along the way. This is Buried in Conversation. With love and peace, Brittany Demarco-Furman.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you want to connect with me, slide into my DMs on Instagram. My handle is Catherine Hover.